Welcome to the Company of Dads podcast, where we explore the sweet, silly, strange, and sublime aspects of being a lead dad in a world where men, who are the go-to parent, aren't always accepted at work, among their friends, or in the community for what they're doing. I'm your host, Paul Sullivan. Our podcast is just one of the many things we produce each week at the Company of Dads. We have various features, including the Lead Dad of the Week. We have our monthly meetups. We have a new resource library for all fathers. The one-stop shop for all of this is our newsletter, The Dad. So sign up today at thecompanyofdads.com/thedad. Today, our guest is Sean Keenan, an economist by training. But we're not here to talk about econ or work. We're here to talk about his harrowing story around a divorce that went to such a very dark place. The least of it was it drained his savings account. His two children were put at the center of a horrifying alimony and custody battle. The accusations and allegations are extreme and terrifying for any parent. He's not exactly coming out of it now, but he does have residential custody of his son and daughter, both in high school. Welcome, Sean, to the Company of Dads podcast. You've gone through a lot. Yeah, you've gone through a lot with your divorce. You're married for 3.5 years. Your kids are in high school now. It's still ongoing. Let's start with a short description of how it all started and how we got to where we are now.
Well, when I filed for divorce in 2010, my son was just over 1 year old and my daughter was 3.5 years old. And we had actually been seeing a family counselor because my daughter at 3.5 kept saying she was very sad and acting depressed. So we went to a good outfit in Westport, Connecticut, family counseling service. And the counselor was concerned about the dynamic, and he recommended couples counseling as well as counseling with my daughter. And at this point, my ex was becoming, from my perspective, increasingly unstable. And her behavior in the house while I was at work seemed to be a major contributing factor to the distress of our young daughter. And after several explosive sessions with this counselor, when I was alone with him, he said, I think you need to start worrying about protecting yourself and your children more than you're worried about trying to protect this relationship, because it does not look salvageable. Mm. So I didn't file for divorce right away, but the situation did get worse, and I was afraid for the safety of my children. And I thought they needed a safe environment, and I filed for divorce.
Yep. And look, millions of people file for divorce every year, but this was the furthest thing from a straightforward divorce, or as it's become, a decade plus later. When did you realize that it wasn't going to be a straightforward divorce where people just split up any assets, divide, visitation with the kids and co-parent and go from there? When did you realize that this was going to be way more complicated than that?
Well, about 5 weeks after I filed for divorce, I was still living in the house in the guest room. It was my turn to take my daughter to preschool. And so I was getting her ready, and my ex came down and was in a state. And so I got my daughter into the car, in the car seat, and then I came back in and I said, what is wrong? And she said, I have video proof and audio proof that you've been molesting the children. And I knew then that this was crazy, getting crazy.
How do you even respond to that?
Well, I said, you're not going to get away with this, because I wasn't molesting them. So the fact that she was saying this was clear that she was planning to manipulate the divorce procedure in this way. And I shook my fist at her, and I was arrested for that. So that was turned into, I threatened to kill her and I was facing criminal charges for that. Like I was arrested within a few days after that.
Wow.
And then but just to back up for a minute, she went to the family counselor with an audio tape that she made by putting a secret recording device under my daughter's pillow to record us while I put her to bed, because I put my daughter to bed every night.
Yeah.
My son was too young. So I'd come home from work. My son was already asleep. And since I didn't get a chance to put him to bed, I would put my daughter to bed. So she recorded that, and she played the recording for this family therapist. And he said, I don't see any evidence of what you're talking about on the tape. It's just murmuring sounds. And that's important because after the guardian ad litem got involved, she said that therapist will never testify. He will not be allowed in court because he was going to testify in my defense. He was the only witness to the whole thing. He was the family counselor. The GAL said he will never appear in court, and he never did. And he wrote her letters, and they were unreturned and unresponded to. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but the point here is a guardian ad litem in the state of Connecticut takes over complete control of a custody case and determines what evidence will come in, what witnesses will testify, who gets time with the children. In my case, she wrote the judge's orders. 2 years later, we had a huge trial in Middletown, 6-day trial, enormous expense, a 6-day trial. And at the end of that, the guardian ad litem presented the judge with orders that she had written, and he accepted them. So
what was your attorney saying at the time? Actually, you had a divorce attorney. I mean, again, like, bring this back. Most people, it gets contentious. It probably go to some sort of mediator, or mediator sort of works it out. It becomes more of a financial deal. Otherwise, you rack up a whole bunch of attorney bills. Yours went right to court, and I've never heard, this is the first time I've ever heard of a 6-day, trial for a divorce. I mean, even billionaires, they just negotiate it out, and it's done. So what was your attorney advising you at the time? What was he or she telling you, what was going on?
Well, my attorney's position, and he got me the worst decision imaginable. So I would certainly have I would probably have gotten a better result if I had represented myself. And just so you're aware, he charged me $750,000, actually, which was all I had. I was totally wiped out. Actually, he had an outstanding invoice for another $240,000, which he didn't press up on me because he lost the case. But his position was, it's all about the sexual abuse charges. And if you're found to have molested the children, you'll go to prison. But if you're found not to have molested the children, you'll win the case because she's made false allegations against you. So it was all about defending myself against these allegations. What he didn't understand was the GAL knew she was lying and told me later, I don't care if she's lying. I don't care about the allegations. I'm going to destroy you.
And when you say that, I mean, this is such a nightmare scenario for any human, not a dad, not a mom, just any human. Why in the world would somebody say that to another human being? I'm going to destroy you.
So it's a great question. I think you have to use a little political science to answer it. Who wants a job where they have complete authority over other human beings and have a total immunity? It's the old adage about power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So people end up in these jobs that are bullies. They seek out this kind of work. And especially if they have some bias that they want to meet out. So who ends up in divorce court in Connecticut? A lot of wealthy or upper middle class couples, and the GAL has the ability to just do anything they want to those people. Literally anything.
This GAL, this role, is this in every sort of divorce case in Connecticut, or do they only get called in certain situations?
Well, that's a good question. They certainly get called in more often when there's money at stake. Now, what I testified about my case and about the role of the GAL at the Senate, as a Senate Combined Finance and Judiciary Committee hearing in 2014, when the total immunity of the GAL was being discussed because there was some legislature introduced to try to limit the immunity and to give parents some choice. And there's an interesting anecdote because my GAL testified right before me. I followed her. But in getting prepared for that testimony, I was shocked to learn that the chairperson of the Connecticut Judiciary Committee was herself a GAL on the side at $450 an hour, being a guardian ad litem in cases which were outside her jurisdiction. In fact, several members of the Connecticut Senate Judiciary Committee moonlight as GALs.
And what is their, in an ideal world, like what is their role supposed to be? I understand yours, it was
They're supposed to inform the court.
Okay.
So they're supposed to be eyes and ears for a judge who doesn't have the time to investigate the details of a contested custody case. Now, my case is also instructive for people who may be facing the situation or may face the situation in the future, in that there's another set of eyes and ears for the court, and that is what we have in Connecticut, we call the Department of Children and Families, DCF. So sometimes it's, in other states, it's called Child Protective Services. There are different titles, but it's always the same. It's a state agency who's designed to protect children and to investigate the welfare of children, which include high conflict custody cases. In my case, DCF was, over the last 5 years, completely excluded from the process. And the judge said, DCF is not allowed in my court. No DCF testimony, no DCF reports, no evidence from DCF is allowed in the courtroom.
Back it up here and you kind of pull the camera back. I mean, as this is happening, is anybody telling you, okay, Sean, here's a way, this is what you need to do to bring this to an end. Hey, Sean, this is what you need to do to extricate yourself and get the best outcome for you and your children. Are you getting any advice like that along the way?
Well, the judges, the lawyers will always tell you, yes, they know how to take care of this. They know people, they've been through this before. And then, you have to put up at least a $25,000 retainer, and their initial investigation is going to run you another $100,000. And then within 6 months, 9 months, they know that the GAL in my case was Sharon Dornfeld, who's the head GAL. They know that the trial judge was Judge Edelman, and they know that the current judge is Judge Winslow, and they know that there's nothing that they can do. So they wait until you've paid all you can pay and you're broke again, and then they just abandon you. They do not want to go up against a corrupt system. You're one client, and there are many other clients out there. So, and after you've been their client for a year or so, they're pretty sure you don't have any more money. So they're ready to move on.
How much money do you think you've paid to attorneys over the years?
Attorneys I probably paid, which is my ex-attorney, because she doesn't work. She never worked. She's on disability. So I always had to pay the attorney who was attacking me. So I probably paid that attorney $600,000 and other attorneys close to at least over $1 million. But I've also paid my ex almost $2.7 million of alimony, which I didn't have. So almost all of my earnings over the last 13 years went to attorney's fees and alimony in order to protect my children. We have no money to send them to college.
When you look
they didn't
at
get residential custody until last year, and they're in high school.
Right. And residential custody means that they live with you full time and they don't live with their mother. Is that correct?
They have no contact with their biological mother.
They have no contact with her. And one of the things you told me, off camera, was that you were married for 3.5 years, but you're obligated to pay lifetime alimony, which is something I've never heard of. I thought the formula was, you're married for 10 years. They take, you pay alimony for 4 years or something like that, or 6 years.
Right.
How did this come about, and can you ever get out of it?
Well, I'm trying to get out of it, and my argument, I will tell you what my argument is, but there's one answer. The answer is the GAL decided that she didn't like me from day one, and she was aware that she could destroy me, and she was aware that I didn't think this was possible. I'm a taxpayer. I'm an American. I didn't do anything wrong. I don't drink or smoke or litter. So she enjoyed um, torturing me and my children, and she put them in harm's way, and they've been harmed. But she was the one who wrote the orders, the lifetime alimony, and gave it to the judge.
Right, but there is an appeal process in this country.
I
Is there
did
no
appeal.
appeal?
And
And
the
it was
appellate court wrote an opinion which I can use now to go back and argue that this should be changed, but they did not overturn the lower court decision. It was a terrible disappointment because, frankly, I think the lawyer argued the case the wrong way. I wish I had been there representing myself. I mean, that's a message for people who are in these cases. You're probably better off representing yourself.
because you're the one who's closest to it. You're the one who knows it the best, and you're the one who knows the most at stake. Is that why, or
Someone needs to own the outcome, and you're the one that's going to need to own the outcome. So if you do not succeed, then okay, you didn't succeed. But if you pay someone a lot of money and then they don't do a good job for you, then they walk away with your money and you're left with a bad outcome.
right, right? I mean, you don't have to tell me your age yet, but generally in your 50s, is that fair to say?
I'm 62.
62. Okay. So you were married for 3.5 years. You're 62. Your ex-wife could, presumably around your age, she could live another 25 years probably easily. And you're on the hook from that 3.5 year marriage for, 35 to 40 years of alimony. Is that correct?
Well, attorneys have told me that that alimony doesn't follow through retirement. That once I retire, that the alimony will stop. But that's one of many, 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 many things that lawyers have told me that have all been proved false, because it's all up to the judge. In family court, the judge makes up their rules as they go along. They do whatever they want. So let me jump to this, because I think this is really important. I was exonerated of all of the allegations of abuse, but the children were abused. They're very seriously abused by their mother. And it took DCF years to create the conditions under which that evidence could be brought to light and those findings could be substantiated. And the judge will not let that evidence into court. So the judge is aware that what we're doing here is we're protecting and rewarding a person who has perjured herself, who is an admitted drug abuser, and is a child abuser at the expense of our family and even the children's higher education. That's the judge's priority, to reward and protect a child abuser, a drug-addicted child abuser, and to punish a family and the children.
But when you go to court and you talk to the judge and with your attorney or on your own, what is the justification that the court gives for allowing this to stand, for not taking that evidence into consideration?
It's hard to believe and it's hard to explain, but you get marked and you're an enemy of the court. And the GAL that I had was very powerful, and she hated me and marked me. And she talks to the judges, even though she's retired. She still works in the court system and talks to all these people, and they just say, this is a bad actor, this is a bad guy, we need to punish him. And she's able to do that. And the facts do not matter. I mean, the facts never mattered. Think about it. False sexual abuse allegations. The trial judge said, well, we can't give the father access to the children because he's angry, and that's bad. He's a bad parent. Whereas the mother now admits that she lied about the allegations, so she's gotten over it. So she's the better parent. That was the reasoning. The judge's ruling, it actually said, I don't like the expression on his face.
Hmm. Throughout all of this, you are an economist. You've continued working. How have you been able to, you know, I don't know, compartmentalize? You can't possibly separate. How have you been able to compartmentalize all of this and still, maintain high performance at work? Again, you must be doing quite well. You've paid your ex-wife several $1 million. I mean, you had to earn that somehow. How have you been able to, still work and then, manage everything around a divorce and protect your children at the same time?
Well, I was fortunate enough to meet a woman who had been through her own divorce situation, not like mine, but still some parallels, who had raised 4 children. And um, and that's my wife now. And without her, I wouldn't have survived. I would not have survived. I mean, and I've also had, um, this is the 4th job I've had during this 13 years. Not because of just me. I mean, I worked for some companies that went through some tumultuous changes, and in the finance industry, uh, job security is hard to come by, right? So, but those job changes have been challenging. We've had health problems. I mean, um, but my wife is a family therapist, and it's just she supported us, not just me, the children. Think about having your mother abandon you, abuse you, and then abandon you.
Right.
I mean, the children who are getting like honors grades and are active in sports at their high school are miracles of recovery. And a lot of that's due to my wife.
Mm. You said that, things would change if you retired. But of course, this is the chicken and the egg. You can't really retire until you earn and save enough money to be able to retire. Is that fair that that's a sort of
Well, that's kind of off the table. I mean, I was fortunate enough to to be able to study economics at a good school and have a good career. And um, I've earned a lot of money. If it weren't for this, probably I'd be able to retire comfortably now. But that's just water under the bridge. That's just gone. So I'm okay with that. I mean, I will retire, and my wife and I will retire like middle class people do. We'll downsize, and that's just the result of this. But I do not believe that the court will accept any significant reduction in alimony because I retire. I mean, when I lost my job at AIG, I was at AIG for a while, and it was a very good job, and I was compensated well at that job. And I left there at a tough time, and so I had to take a job that had significantly lower comp. And the judge increased her proportion of my income, and said, I believe your bonus, you've always had these bonuses, and I believe they're going to continue. And I said, well, I got a different job. It's a smaller job at a smaller company. There's no way I'm going to get a bonus like that. She said, I don't believe you. It's my decision. So I'm raising her proportion of your income. And that year I got a much, much smaller bonus, and we were broke. It all goes to alimony. Not only alimony, but I was paying child support. I was forced to pay child support after the children had been removed from her home. Not only that, but even under the court orders, there was a division of expenses requirement that she never complied with. So she owes us thousands and thousands of dollars for basic expenses. The court never intended to force her to comply. The court always said, whatever she does is okay. Just contempt of the court orders. They smiled at her and told her it was okay.
Sean, the people are listening to this, a lot of dads, this is company dads, if they're on the precipice of something like this, do you have any advice that you would give them or anything that you think of, like, from your experience? Like, is there something that they could learn from what you've been
I
through?
yeah, I think I give two pieces of advice. One is seriously consider representing yourself. The attorney's fees will be astronomical, and the marginal benefit of having the attorney is not worth it. If you know some attorneys, or you can do some chat GPT and inform yourself, you can probably do almost as well. And you save a, you could lose all of your life savings easily in a contested divorce case. So that's my first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is try to avoid having a GAL involved in your case. Our efforts in 2014 did lead to a law which allows choice among GALs by litigants. So if you're forced into a situation, contested custody situation, and a GAL will be involved by court order, you need to review those GALs backgrounds the way you would review a doctor that you're going to for major surgery. You need to know what they've done. I mean, it's worse because in this case, it's like going to a hospital to see a surgeon where you don't know what's wrong with you. And he's just like, I'm going to put you out. And once you're out, I might take out your liver. I might take out your spleen. I'll transplant the lung. That's all up to me. You'd want to know that was a good surgeon, right? But that's what happens. Once the GAL's involved, you don't know what they're going to do. And you can't stop them. So you research the GAL carefully. And if you don't like what you see, you better object.
Right. How are your kids doing now?
They're up and down. I mean, actually, they have been amazing. They've had a great transition from middle school to high school. But like you said, this has been ongoing. We wanted to bring them to a wedding in Italy last summer. And there was a court order, which the mother completely admittedly, like it was in a transcript, she said out of spite, she refused to sign the form for the children to get passports. And because we don't have full custody, if she doesn't sign the form, they can't have passports. So I paid lawyers to try to get them the passports. The lawyers took the money, they didn't get the passports. Finally, we had to file a specific motion in court asking the judge to instruct her to sign the forms. We got the motion, we succeeded. She just was in contempt of the motion, just wouldn't sign the forms. So it came down to the 11th hour. We had to do expedited processing. We had to drag her back into court. It was that we almost didn't go. Actually, the day before we were supposed to leave, we got the passports. And we incurred an enormous amount of expense trying to get this done, including going to the court. And we told the judge, we want to be compensated for this. She's in contempt of the original motion. Judge said, you're not entitled to any compensation, but she does have to sign the forms. So that was like, it's just trauma after trauma after trauma. It's just, we just can't relax as a family because we're never because of the lifetime alimony, we're never free from family court. And the other side is causing mischief all the time. File motions against me for whatever, and then you have to go to court. I've been to court hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times.
Does it get better when your kids turn 18? Does that get you up?
It'll limit the issues that can be used to file motions, but it doesn't solve the problem. I'm in family court for life.
And this is, I'm not advocating anybody, to run away from the court, but if you moved to New York and it didn't live in Connecticut anymore, moved across the line, if you retired to the Carolinas or something like that, does that change anything for you?
Well, yes and no. I mean, certainly we could move to another country, and I've been advised to do that. Attorneys have advised me to move to another country. But in becoming part of a community of people who have had problems with the family court, the indication is that it really depends on what state you move to. I mean, you don't escape the jurisdiction, but the likelihood that you'd be arrested for some trivial motion in family court coming from a Connecticut family court in states that don't want to use their tax dollars to support that activity, that's lower. In other states, you just be thrown in jail in that state and then extradited.
Sean Keenan, thank you for being my guest today on the Company of
That's
Dads
my pleasure.
podcast. One final question, and I think about this, as you need support through this. You've talked about your wife and this, but it had been going on for so long. Have there been, and it's such an extreme story, as you said, it's almost unbelievable, but it's happened to you. What support have you received from, friends and colleagues or relatives? Have you received support from them to help kind of keep you going and keep you focused on the best possible outcome from a bad situation?
Well, I have a few close friends, but sadly, I'd have to report the opposite. Is that this kind of traumatic experience is extremely isolating, and it transmits to family and friends. And if it doesn't stop after years, you find those relationships are harder and harder to maintain. So, I mean, that's one of the challenges. That is, it's hard for people to believe. It's toxic, and and I think the players in the family court know this. It's part of the intention, is that isolating the victims is part of the strategy for continuing their operation, which is a money-making operation. So it's been very, very difficult. Without my wife, I would not have survived. I'm pretty sure of that. I'd be like in a nut house.
Sean Keenan, thank you again for sharing your story with the Company of Dads.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for what you do, because I really I think that celebrating fatherhood is a wonderful thing, and I really appreciate your efforts to do that, and to keep fathers working together and understanding each other. So thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you for listening to the Company of Dads podcast. I also want to thank the people who make this podcast and everything else that we do with the Company of Dads possible. Helder Mira, who is our audio producer. Lindsay Decker, who handles all of our social media. Terry Brennan, who's helping us with the newsletter and audience acquisition. Emily Servin, who is our web maestro. And of course, Evan Roosevelt, who is working side by side with me in many of the things that we do here at the Company of Dads. It's a great team, and we're just trying to bring you the best in fatherhood. Remember, the one-stop shop for everything is our newsletter, The Dad. Sign up at thecompanyofdads.com/thedad. Thank you again for listening.